All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure other folks will join us as well. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fifth event in the Next Step series. We really appreciate you making time to join us this evening. We want to acknowledge that this has been Spirit Week, planned by our Staff Advisory Council, otherwise known as SAC, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. So we just want to give them a round of applause, thumbs up on the work that they've been doing this week. We've dressed up as your favorite Hulu or Netflix character, Disney characters, and today was your favorite team or player. So for those joining us, in case you're wondering why there's more sweatshirts than usual or, zip ups or button ups, that's what's going on. Is folks were representing various athletic teams. And so we have quarantine day tomorrow. So who knows what staff, faculty, and students are going to dress up as. And then Friday is Stephens gear. So we encourage everyone to participate as you are able and willing. Our Next Step series was at the request of our president, President Diane Lynch, and that is an initiative being co-led by Shannon Walls, an amazing alumna, and myself. Shannon has served the institution in a plethora of capacities. The current is the special assistant to the president and our Title IX coordinator. So we want to acknowledge and thank Shannon for all of her hard work and service to Stephens, and especially on this initiative, contacting students and running behind the scenes in events like this. My name is Shashawn Dial. I serve as the inaugural director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Stephens. A new role began fall 2019. So I am enjoying serving my first term as an employee. I also am an alumna from the philosophy, law, and rhetoric major. And Shannon's was theater. So we use our transferable skills from our programs all the time. And we welcome you and any other alums who may be joining us this evening. We also want to thank the incredibly hardworking, creative, and great collaborators who run our CCPD, otherwise known as the Center for Career and Professional Development. So we want to acknowledge Aaron Morris, who's with us tonight, our executive director, and then of course our featured facilitator is the other part of E Squared, as I call them, or the dream team of professionals. So we encourage you to ask questions tonight, and we're going to ask you to just direct them into the chat. And then that way we can present them. If you're comfortable sharing your question with everyone, feel free. And Shannon and I will be monitoring that chat room and making sure that your question gets asked after the formal part of the presentation. If you're not comfortable sending it to everyone, no problem. You can feel free to do your drop down arrow and you can send your question directly to Shannon or myself. And we will be glad to be the mouthpiece to ask that for you. Okay? So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce my esteemed colleague, Erin Hansen. And Erin serves as the current manager of career development here at Stephens College. As an alumna of Stephens, the class of 2011, woo woo, Erin understands the power of Stephens and how it can impact your life. After moving to Seattle in 2013, Erin utilized the Stephens Alumni Network to land a job with e-commerce company Zulily. She worked in supply chain for 4 years and eventually managed a team of 11 account managers before she made a career shift into recruiting. Erin recruited over 200 new team members in 2 years as a recruiter, working with leadership from all over the Zulily organization. She brought in buyers, analysts, program managers, new managers, and directors. However, her eyes turned back to the Midwest when her adorable nephews were born, and she once again used the power of the Stephens network. Through her connections with the advancement office, she met Ellen Morris, the director of CCPD, and the rest is history, her story, their story, them story. When Erin is not on campus, she enjoys performing in community theater, which we can't wait to hopefully support her and see her. She enjoys spending time with her family, and her newest endeavor, fostering cats through Second Chance. So you can feel free to use your reaction buttons if you know where those are on the lower part of your screen, and you can do a thumbs up and a clap for the Erin Hansen.
Thank you so much, Shashawn. And a special shout out to Chris Rigby. I didn't know he'd be here, but he was my advancement connection. I met him at a Stephens alumni luncheon that I was invited to, and he made the connection between me and Ellen, and that's how I ended up here. So it really truly is the power of the network that's gotten me literally everywhere I wanted to go job-wise. And kind of a fun fact that relates back to the presentation today, which I'll start to share my screen, is that I virtually interviewed for my role at Stephens. Between Ellen and I, we just couldn't make scheduling happen for me to come in person, and so we utilized Zoom a couple of different times, and I met with her. I met with Dr. Trish Parsons and Alyssa from Student Development, and was able to successfully navigate that interview and land my job in 45 minutes flat. So virtual interviewing can be scary, but when you do it right, it can be a really, really useful tactic. So I just want to make sure, are you all able to see my normal screen and not my presenter screen? All right.
Yes,
cool.
we can.
Thank you, Ellen, for the verbal yes. Appreciate it. So I want to start off tonight just by thanking everyone for attending. We have a myriad of different folks here, from current students to alumni and staff members, and I know we can all benefit from learning about this, whether it's interviewing folks or just participating in a Zoom call and kind of understanding what goes into everything and how to set yourself up for success. You know, COVID-19 has definitely turned the world upside down, and so interviewing has taken that as well. And like I said, I feel strangely uniquely qualified to host this, since I had my own virtual interview, but I also was a recruiter for 2 years and held my fair share of phone screens, both good and bad, and have heard a lot of answers to a lot of questions that I've had to ask. So let's go ahead and get going. So I said a brief thank you, but I want to be a little bit more specific. Thank you to Shashan and to Shannon for inviting us to be a part of this series. Professional development during these times often gets pushed to the side when stuff hits the fan, because we need to focus on really the operational tasks, but it doesn't have to, and it doesn't need to. And so I appreciate you all recognizing that and giving us a platform. I also want to thank Ellen Morris, my manager, and the director of CCPD, for asking me to tackle this topic and for providing unlimited amounts of support through all of this. She's been fantastic to work with. And then all of you for tuning in. Like I said, virtual interviewing isn't easy, and it's tougher now with resources being limited. And so I appreciate you all wanting to learn and improve your skill set. And I'll also offer up that after this, if I haven't gotten to answer your question, or you find yourself in deeper waters than you anticipated, please feel free to reach out. So to tell you a little bit about CCPD, we are here to help students kind of package everything that they've learned in college into a gift and present that in a way that makes it obtainable for someone to want to buy. We do that through career counseling, resume writing workshops. We do workshops on how to negotiate your salary. We do similar things to this with interview skills. We help them make connections with alums, which is probably my favorite part. I love being a matchmaker and finding them someone who really speaks their language and can help them navigate a city they want to move to or an industry that they want to be a part of. So if any of those things speak to you outside of just virtual interviewing, feel free to hit us up. We also have some awesome social media. I run both of our social media accounts, but Ellen also says they're great, so I trust her opinion. On Facebook, you'll find Tip Tuesdays, where I'll give you interview tips or resume tips. And on our Instagram, I do Positive Quote Sundays and Meme Wednesdays. So you can tune in for some fun content outside of just regular old-fashioned career development. So on to our preview. We're going to tackle all of these subjects. Some of them a little bit more than others. I'm going to really dive deep into common questions and interview techniques, because I think that that is probably the scariest part of an interview, is kind of going into the unknown and not knowing what you're going to be asked and how to present your answers. So that's where we'll really dive deep, but we'll tackle all of these in one way, shape, or form. Before I really dive in though, I would love for you all to put in a chat on a scale of 1 to 5 how you feel about virtual interviewing. Some folks are going to feel really confident, some folks are going to feel less, and I would just love to know how everyone feels overall. And I'll see if I can actually see that, because my display currently doesn't show that. So I might need someone to tell me.
You have a 3, a 3, a 4, between a 5 and a 6, a
Oh,
3, another 3.
okay, so most
Like it
people
or not, it's here to stay.
yes. So most folks feeling middle ground, someone feeling very confident in their abilities, which I love. Confidence is like key in interviews. So it's one of those like fake it till you make it scenarios. So that's awesome. Good to know most folks are feeling middling. We don't have anyone freaking out too much. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll all be feeling in that 4 to 5 range though. So these are my tips and tricks for prepping. Interview prepping is probably what people dislike the most about interviews because it takes a lot of time and dedication, but it's one of the most important steps to feeling successful and prepared. First, you're going to want to do a self-assessment, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth here in just a minute. And then next, you're going to do a lot of research and a lot of practicing, hopefully. Ellen and I are happy to practice with you through mock interviews. You can always find a friend, a trusted family member, someone in your network. A lot of folks are happy to help you practice. There are also some other techniques that you can do practice-wise that don't require other people, so I'll talk about that a little bit. And then last, you're going to want to confirm and plan. A lot of folks fear the confirmation phase because they feel like they're over-communicating, but the last thing that you want to do is miss your interview because you had it set in Central Standard Time and they had it set in Eastern Standard Time, or you're thinking it's on Skype and they're thinking it's on Zoom. So confirming is so important. And when we're in the real world, you would normally also confirm logistics. But now you're going to be working on planning out your space a little bit. So you're going to reallocate that time somewhere else. And I think the key to interview prep is this is really a cycle. You have to complete it with each and every interview to be able to really intake all of the feedback and everything that's coming. And I know that sounds like a lot, but my personal opinion on interviewing and job applying is it's quality over quantity. You really want to find a role within a company that offers you everything that you want or as close to everything as you can get. And that can take some work, but you should be picky and you should do your homework to figure out what those types of companies look like and what those types of roles are. So the first part of your self-assessment, in this, you're going to want to think back on your past interviews. You're going to think about what you did well. So the examples that you gave that were just super killer, you got a great response. They said, oh God, I love that. You're going to think about the outfit that you wore that made you feel really confident. You're going to think about all of the things that you did well. Next, you're going to think about the things that you did differently, or in more street language, like the things that you just sucked at. So what examples did you have that just didn't hit? The room was kind of silent. Maybe they were just slow and they took too much time, or you rambled. Those are all important. And then think about what your outcome was. So sometimes the outcome is a little different from what we think it's going to be. Sometimes you might feel like you bombed that interview and then you actually got another interview or you got a job offer. And I think it's always fine to ask for feedback, especially if you get a job offer and you start, once you feel comfortable. I think I did that with Ellen after my first 30 days. I asked her about my interview and how it felt for her. So asking for that feedback and thinking about that outcome, it may be, for instance, if you're feeling like you bombed that interview because you were really nervous, maybe your nerves actually allowed your true authentic self to come out because you weren't as guarded. And maybe that's what made them fall in love with you. And that's something that you can take back. So think about all of those things. And then the next part of your self-assessment is going to be thinking about all the things that matter to you. So all of your accomplishments, your career goals, where you want to go, your skill sets, your experiences. And to expand a little on experiences, these don't necessarily have to be work experiences. They could also be volunteer experiences or leadership experiences that you've had that have really meant something to you. And you're going to want to take all of those and then use your good examples and your bad examples from your past interviews and all of these things that matter and form new examples. And you're also going to be influenced by the research that you're going to do that we're going to talk about next, because your examples should be specific for the job that you're applying for and for the company that you're applying to. So your research. I actually really enjoy research, but I kind of like to internet stalk people and places. So I feel like it puts my internet sleuthing skills to the test when I want to go look up a new company. So while you're researching, there are a few things that you're really going to want to look at that are pretty basic, like company culture, what projects they're working on, how they're performing. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. And I'll go over some websites in general on the next slide. But I think it's important to go a step further than just the basics, because you want to make sure that this company is the right fit for you. So for example, if you're someone who really wants to be close with your coworkers, maybe you're moving to a new city and you're hoping your coworkers are going to be your new base of friends. You want to go out to happy hour. You want to make sure that there are like company lunches that you can partake in. You're going to want to look for photos that resonate that type of message to you, or look for benefits or perks that speak to that. It'll also depend on your industry, to be quite honest. If you go into banking, it's going to be a little bit more formal than if you go into theater. So keep in mind too, depending on your industry, there are going to be certain standards that may or may not be kept. Another thing to keep in mind is the perks that you're looking for. You may be able to find, what is their work from home policy? You might be able to find if they allow dogs in the office. All of these types of things matter, and you should also look kind of beyond the surface of that even. So if you're a person that struggles with paying attention to things, I'm that type of person. Like, I need to have a very focused work environment if I'm working on a project. Having a dog in my office may not be the most helpful thing for me personally. And I think Ellen can attest to that. When Rosie and Ellie ever come in the room, Diane Lynch's dogs, I don't work anymore. I'm just enamored with them. And that's great for 15 minutes. But if they were constantly in the office, that would probably be a problem for me. A couple more things that you want to look at: the who's who. So who are the big bosses? Who might you report to? Look at big announcements. So have they gone into new markets? Do they have new clients? These are all things that if you look at the client base, maybe those clients resonate with you and maybe they don't. But they're also really helpful things to bring up in your interview. It makes you look like you've done your homework and like you've done your research, and then you can talk about those things instead of just having kind of stagnant conversation. Now, this is all great, but you need to know where to find these things. So let's talk about where you can do your research. I like to bump this into 3 categories. The first category is company websites. So you can look at their career pages and really find out what they're trying to sell. This is where they're going to be their most buttoned up. So they're generally going to talk about benefits, perks. They're going to broadcast what jobs they have. They might talk about all the locations that they have. But this is going to be the most put together kind of profile that you're going to get. Think of it as like the Bumble of the different places that you can look. If you're on dating websites, you'll get that reference. And if you're not, then you won't. The next grouping are kind of social categories or social websites. Facebook, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, Monster, ZipRecruiter. These are websites that companies can promote their jobs in their companies, but they can't necessarily own the content that's all there. Here you might be able to find reviews of the companies, or people might be posting about their experiences. I will say, take those with a grain of salt. I like to compare it to Yelp, especially Glassdoor has this kind of reputation. When you go to a restaurant and you have a really bad experience, you have that like anger deep inside of you where you're just really motivated to go write a nasty Yelp review. You don't get that same feeling when you have a really positive experience or just an okay experience. So I always say, like, Glassdoor is great if you really want to know the most horrible thing that a company might do to you, but also keep in mind that there are really amazing things that companies can offer you that may not be as well advertised. But I still think you should keep your options open and take a look at those and go in like knowing what might happen. And then the last category for you all is websites like Career Contessa, The Muse, or GeekWire. And these are websites that often have articles about popular companies or companies that are in particular industries, and they'll tell you about what projects they're working on, how they're performing financially, and they'll just kind of give you a behind the scenes look. They might even interview people at those companies. GeekWire is specific to kind of tech or e-com. The Muse is more creatively based. So these are going to stay within particular industries. So they're pretty easy to keep up with and subscribe to, because if you decide you want to go be in fashion, you can go to the Muse. And if you decide that you want to go be in supply chain, the GeekWire might be better for you. And the last part of your research is knowing your interviewers. This can be really important, especially if you want to make a really solid impression on someone in particular. I will say all of your research should stay completely professional. Please don't deep dive their personal Facebook or their Instagram or their weight loss blog. Those aren't for you. But if they have a website that's about a side business, or they post articles on LinkedIn or anything like that, those are totally up for grabs. This type of knowledge serves two purposes in my mind. The first being that it's going to make you a lot less nervous. When you humanize someone and you take that unknown factor out, they become a lot less scary. When I think about talking about the president of a college and I need to go present to her, that makes me really nervous. But then when I put Diane in that seat and I think about all of my experience with her and all the knowledge that I have and the type of conversation I can have, that suddenly seems a lot easier. Still a little scary, of course, but it's not quite as bad. But the second reason that you're going to want to do this is it's going to make your conversation a lot easier. When you know what makes that person tick or what you have in common, you can bring up those subjects or even pivot your examples to fit what matters to them. So for example, if I know, like one of my interviewers went to college in Seattle, and maybe they list that they volunteer as a soccer coach for their kids' soccer team, then I can bring up the Seattle Sounders, which is the soccer team in Seattle that Zulily, my old company, was the shirt sponsor for. And I can talk about how I used to bring candidates to those games and how exciting it was and how it invigorated my candidates and wanting to be a part of Zulily, and how it lightened that fire for me to love soccer again, because I played soccer as a kid. It's things like that that really make the difference in an interview, where you're not just a candidate anymore, you're a person that they know, that they relate to, that they like. And that can be the key sometimes in getting a job offer when you're up against someone else, is you're a human. You're not just that candidate that they met that one time, but you're someone that they related to, that they really enjoyed, that they want to bring into that company culture. Any questions so far? I know that's a lot of information.
There are no questions in the chat right now, other than just some agreement from a former headhunter that's on our call that says that your research advice is stellar.
Thanks, Chris. So the next section, interview questions and responses. Like I said, I think this is where we're probably going to spend the majority of our time. Interview questions can be really scary because you don't know what you're going to get asked in an interview, but I will tell you, almost all of your interviews are going to be comprised of the same types of questions put to you in different ways, especially your first or second interviews. Your final interview might be a little bit more specific, but they're likely still going to ask a lot of these questions. So the first question you're always going to get is, tell me about yourself. And this can be really hard, right? Because what are you supposed to say? Do you want to tell them about like the fact that you foster cats in your spare time and you love doing community theater and your nephews are really cute? While that's really important to who you are as a human being, probably not. I suggest keeping this strictly professional and having an elevator pitch kind of at the ready anywhere you go, whether that is, oh, hi, Feta. Whether that is at a networking event or at a job interview, you're going to use it at some point. So having it a bit rehearsed isn't a bad thing. Hi, honey. So I'll give you guys an example of my elevator pitch. It's about 60 seconds long, which is on the longer end of what I recommend. You could also do, yes, you're going to need to stay down here. They love you, but they want to see me. So 60 seconds is probably on the longer end. I generally recommend 30 to 60 though. But my personal elevator pitch is, my name is Erin Hansen. I grew up in Columbia, Missouri, and I earned my Bachelor of Fine Arts from Stephens College in 2011. I moved to Seattle in 2013, and I initially tried my hand at professional theater before deciding that wasn't the path I was going to go down, and was fortunate enough to land several different roles with the company Zulily. My favorite role by far was my role as a recruiter, where I was able to bring in a myriad of different people into buyer roles, program manager, and analyst roles. I recently moved back to Columbia, Missouri, where I act as the manager of career and professional development at my alma mater. And I'm able to help students really package their qualities into a way that makes it obtainable for employers. I teach resume writing skills, salary negotiation, and I even get to host an etiquette meal twice a year. So it's sweet, it's simple. It also has something kind of interesting in there. A lot of folks ask me about the etiquette meal because they don't know what that is, or they think it's really weird. So I kind of like to throw something in there that I think could be interesting for folks and could cause a follow-up question. So some question categories that we're going to go into. So normally at the beginning of your interview, you're going to have some introductory questions or softball questions. These are to get you warmed up. There's generally not a wrong or right answer for them, though I will say they're still important. So these types of questions might be, what made you interested in this role? So you might talk about the company culture, or if you have a contact that works at that company, that's a great time to name drop and say, well, I heard Sean talk so highly of Stephens College, and it really just made me interested, and upon further research, I decided that I really, really wanted to find a role within this institution that would work for me. You might talk about your favorite project that you worked on recently. That was always a favorite of mine. It kind of allowed my candidates to brag on themselves early on and make themselves feel good. And then what's something that you're proud of that you've worked on in the last 6 months? That was another favorite of mine, to just open them up, make them feel really comfortable. And again, you're not going to give me a wrong answer to something that you're really proud of in the last 6 months. I'm not going to judge you for whatever makes you proud. The next category is personal questions. So these are going to be digging into your personal qualities and how you handle particular situations. So they might ask you, how do you handle stress? They might ask you how you stay organized, or what's your decision-making process like? These can be a little hard to answer. I generally, when I get asked these questions, like to include examples. So instead of just saying, how do I stay organized? And I say, well, I keep a written planner and that really helps me stay organized. That's a really short answer. But I might go into, well, you know, I used to not be as organized as I am today, but when I had this project that came up, it really opened my eyes to all the tools that I had available. I really like to use Trello because it helps me track my projects and I can move them from category to category. Plus I can share my progress with my manager or any coworkers that really want to check in, and it helps us all stay organized together. That's a little bit more specific than just saying, I like keeping a regular organizer. And it also gives them the opening to ask me about projects that I've worked on or my communication style or other things. Now, the next category is going to be philosophical or situational questions. And this is what you'll encounter the most. What would you do if, and then they'll give you a particular situation. Tell me about a time when you did this, or give me an example of that. These will likely include stressors. How do you handle stressful situations? How do you handle tough conversations? How do you deal with, depending on if you're going into customer service, how do you handle rude customers? How do you coordinate with other people and work within groups? All of those things are going to be on the table within this type of a category. The next category is knowledge and experience-based questions. So they're going to ask you these if you're dealing with a more technical job or if your job deals with particular softwares or techniques. So even our theater majors get asked these types of questions. Describe your experience with Stanislavski method or Uta Hagen. For our fashion majors, they might get asked about Photoshop. For our bio majors, they're going to get asked about particular techniques in the lab. So all of these are things you should be prepared to answer. And you can often find what technology or techniques companies are using by doing your research and looking on their website, talking to people that work there, or even viewing some of the material that they put out. You might be able to spot what they're using to make some of that. The next are curveball questions, and this is honestly my least favorite category because they don't matter. These types of questions, whatever answer you give, don't expect judgment. If I ask you what your favorite Disney princess is or what like vegetable you relate to most, I'm just looking for you to go with it. I'm looking for you to have some fun, do a little bit of improv with me, but I'm not going to judge you if you say that you relate to an eggplant the most and I think that you're a carrot. Like, that's not a thing. So if you can ask these questions, take them with a grain of salt, roll with the punches, and just have fun. They're probably giving it to you to give you a little bit of a break. And then closing questions. So these are things that you'll hear from almost any recruiter, regardless of how the interview has gone. When are you available to start? How much notice does your employer need? And do you have any questions for me? The last one is really important. You have to bring questions with you to your interview. It doesn't matter if you don't have them, you have to bring them. So even if you're just confirming something that you've read, like a perk or a benefit or the company culture, it's still important that you ask questions. And I'll talk about it a little more later, but what I'll say is when folks haven't asked me questions in the past, I assume it's because they're either too shy or they haven't done their research and they don't really care that much about the job. And you don't want to fall into either of those categories. And then as you're starting to answer these questions, think about what the employer is going to think about and ask yourself, what am I bringing to the table with my examples? What can I do for the employer and how does my example show that? And how can I improve the organization that I want to join? Because that's exactly what the employer is thinking. We'd love to think that people hire us because we're great people and we're nice and we're funny and we're good to work with. But at the end of the day, we are being hired for a set of skills and to do a particular thing. And so it's important to remember that recruiting, as personal as it feels, is actually not that personal at the end of the day sometimes. Another important thing that you're going to want to think about is the strengths and weaknesses question. This always gets asked in some way, shape, or form. And so don't be surprised when it does get asked, and think about what those strengths and weaknesses are. And some people really struggle with that. I'm someone who sometimes struggles to say what my strengths are because I tend to focus on the negative personally. I never do for anyone else. And so I'm actually the perfect friend to go to when you struggle with that, because I'll like raise you up all day and make you feel really good. And so if you're like that, talk to your friends and talk to your coworkers about what you do really well, and they're going to give you those things. Now your weaknesses, those are tough to talk about sometimes, and we'll go into it a little bit on the next slide, so I won't spend too much time on it, but more than anything, you'll just want to turn them into a positive at the end. And if you're still struggling with figuring out what your strengths are, Strengths Quest is a really, really great tool. I also recommend VIA. They'll give you, so the difference between the two, Strengths Quest will give you 5 words that really resonate with your inner strengths. So mine are empathy, communication, kindness. There are a few others, but those are things that are just innately good within me and I can bring to any role that I'm in. VIA will give you 27 virtues and they'll rank them in order of how they matter to you. And those can sometimes be surprising. My top one is honesty. And I was honestly surprised about that because I'm the type of person who is very tactful in my feedback. I'm not always the most honest in my feedback, or at least not brutally honest. But when I read into it, it actually was talking about wanting to form genuine relationships and having very honest, genuine connections with people. And that definitely resonated more with me than thinking about having a lot of candor with the people around me. So I said I would talk about this, but turning weakness into a positive. What I mean by that isn't just handing them something and saying like, oh, it's fine that this is a weakness because it doesn't matter. What I mean by that is talking about how you're working on it. So something that I often will say is my weakness is that I'm a perfectionist and I don't say no to projects. And that can sound really cliche, but the way that I get out of that cliche zone is I talk about how it affects the people around me and how I'm working on it. So for me personally, my inability to say no to projects means that my work has less quality to it because I'm rushing to get it done. And then at times I fall behind on my project timelines, and that puts pressure on the people around me to push out their own timelines. And I'm working on that by doing gut checks before I take on projects. Before I immediately say yes, I look at my plate and I think about how full it is. And not just how full that plate is, but how full is my personal plate? Because it's important for me to have work-life balance. And so if my work plate is overflowing, well, I've got to put some of it onto my personal plate, which means I don't have time to go do the things that I want to do. And am I willing to do that right now, or am I not willing to do that? And when I'm not having that inner conversation with myself, I then go to someone that I trust and I say, do you think that I can take this on? And being able to have that type of conversation with someone and saying, I do my own gut check internally first, and then if I think that I'm wrong or I think I'm not doing enough and I go to someone else, doesn't show weakness on my part, it shows self-awareness on my part. So being able to turn those things, tell them what you're doing to fix them and how you're working through your weaknesses and trying to make them better, that's what people are looking for. They're not trying to like villainize you or make you feel like crap when they ask you that question. They genuinely want to know what you're working on. So preparing your pitch for your strengths and your weaknesses. Since we all know that we're going to get these, you should just prepare 3 on both sides, is what I would say. 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses. You don't want it to sound rehearsed, but you should know what these are and in general what you want to say about them. Another question that you might get is, why should I hire you? I don't hear that quite as much now as I used to, but it is still a question that some people ask. What I would steer away from is saying why the other applicants aren't deserving, and focus on why you are deserving. Negativity will not get you very far. I've had plenty of candidates that have been negative about their former employer or about their current job. And it's quite often such a turnoff that my hiring managers wouldn't even move forward with them because they said they didn't want that type of energy on their team. So don't take the bait, be positive, and focus on why you're the right fit, what your skill sets are. You can prepare what I call value statements. So they're a combination of your accomplishments and your skills that you're going to bring. So you can rely on, I accomplished this in my last role through using these skills, and I know I can bring that to your organization, especially on the project that you're working on here. Those types of statements are really, really powerful. And then if you can, prepare some stats. Data says a lot more than just words. So if you can talk about how you saved money, how you bettered an institution, any of those things, that's going to be really, really helpful for your employer to understand the impact that you made. The next question that I absolutely despise is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I despise this question. Yeah, I can see Shashan's face too. And Shashan has done this too. We've had a lot of career pivots, and that's not a bad thing. And if you had asked me 5 years ago if I thought I'd be back in Columbia working at Stephens, I would have said no, because I had just moved to Seattle and I was really happy with my career and my life and my friends. And I didn't have 2 adorable nephews yet. But now I'm really happy that I made this move. And so I could have never foreseen that. But this question still gets asked all the time. And so it's important that you have an answer. These don't have to be super specific answers, and they should not be personal. So you shouldn't say, I'm hoping to be married in 5 years, or I want to have a kid, or I hope to own a house, or I want to have a ranch with a bunch of horses. Again, all very interesting things that I personally would love to know about you, but your interviewer isn't meaning your personal goals in 5 years, they're meaning your professional goals. So this could be as simple as, I hope to be on track to be blah, blah. I hope to have the skill sets ready to be able to move forward on the path. I hope to be with this particular organization doing something in marketing. It can be anything like that. This doesn't have to be specific, but it should be realistic. I will say that. So know what's realistic in your industry. I used to have a lot of folks that would come in through the buying track at Zulily, and they would say, well, I want to be a merchandising manager within 5 years. And they're coming in fresh out of college. Our merchandising managers at Zulily generally had around 10 to 12 years of experience. You're not going to be able to move into that role within 5 years. And you can generally gauge what type of a track you might be able to have within a company by looking at its employees on LinkedIn and seeing what their tracks are and understanding your industry and what that's going to look like. Some industries move a lot faster than others, and some people move a lot faster than others too. Just because most merchandising managers had 10 to 12 years of experience doesn't mean I didn't have merchandising managers that only had 6. So it's not always going to be out of reach, but you should be as realistic as you can be with these goals. Here are some other common questions. I won't go into all of them, but you should just be prepared to answer these. Some of these are more geared towards our current students than our alums, but you might still get asked these. I get asked all the time why I chose to be a theater major, all the time. I'm sure, Shannon, you get those types of questions too. And it's really fun to be able to tell people about how the skills that I learned in theater are really applicable to everywhere I go, especially the skills that I didn't even earn through my classes, but the skills that I earned as a stage manager. Being a stage manager at Stephens taught me how to work with my peers, even when they didn't respect me, It taught me how to fix problems on the fly because the stage manager calls all the shots when the show is on. It taught me how to communicate clearly. Like, being a stage manager was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, honestly, from a skill set perspective. And so you can look at those types of things and bring those into conversation. So, like I said, asking questions of your interviewer is non-negotiable. You have to bring questions with you. Some good examples are about the culture. Tell me about the work culture. Tell me about this team's culture. Tell me about a typical day. So those are all kind of baseline questions you should definitely be asking. And I would say they're questions that you should ask in the beginning of your interview process, not towards the end. But some great questions are going to be job specific. So if you know that they just started a new account, for instance, or they just moved into a new marketplace, get really specific on what is the role going to be doing with that, and then ask follow-up questions as you get answers. They should all be based on the research that you have. And then one of my biggest pet peeves as a recruiter was when I felt like I was getting asked questions that I just couldn't answer not because I didn't have the knowledge, but because they weren't meant for me. As a recruiter, I couldn't tell you necessarily what someone's management style was like or what their team outings were or anything like that, but I could answer a lot of questions about the company and the company culture and different career paths that different people have taken. So make sure you're asking the right people the right questions. That'll be important. And then ask questions that help determine if you actually want to work at this company. Don't ask fluff questions. I would keep your questions 3 to 5 probably would be my perfect number there for you. If you have more, that's fine, but just know they may not leave time for more questions. You may have to follow up with an email because generally recruiters allot between 5 to 10 minutes is what I would say for questions. But it's really important that you're making sure that this company and this role is a fit for you. I like to compare interviewing to dating a lot. It takes 2 to tango. You both have to want to be in that relationship to make it work. And so you have just as much of a right to ask questions as your interviewer does. So here are some examples that you can ask. Career pathing and growth opportunities are always really important. Not only do you get an answer to that, but it shows your interviewer that you want to see a future with them and that you really want to be a part of that company. Asking about where they started in their career path is great, especially if you're talking to someone who's on the team or the manager. Just understanding where they've gone and where they come from and their knowledge base. Asking, I'll kind of skip a few, but asking if you can clarify anything for them is often a really, really nice thing to do. Maybe you rambled through an answer or you kind of rushed, and especially with virtual interviewing, maybe you cut out at some point and they didn't want to interrupt you and say that. That gives them the opening to say, yeah, can we go back to your response to this question and can you clarify this for me? It's just a really kind thing to do for your interviewer, especially when you're doing a virtual interview. So I mentioned this earlier, I won't go too much into it, but preparing your questions when you don't have those, it kind of tells me that you're shy, that you haven't researched, or you don't know enough to ask meaningful questions. So just make sure that you're asking the questions that really matter to you. A couple of things that I recommend not asking, at least in a first interview. How much does it pay? What are the hours? Do I have to work every day? How much vacation time? And do I get free tickets or free perks or whatever? I will say more companies are being really open with this information up front. So this topic may come up, especially the topic of pay might come up in your first interview. And if they bring it up, I think it's totally fine. But I would steer away from bringing it up yourself. You will find out eventually. You can talk to them about it in a later interview, in your final interview, or even when the offer comes through. But I would keep your questions to figuring out if you really want to work for the company versus what the pay is and the benefit to it. Now, a couple of methods that you can use to make sure that your answers are really succinct and tight. The first is the STAR method. So it's our favorite method because we're the Stephens stars. And I personally really like this. One of my tactics when I don't want to do a mock interview with a friend is I actually write out, excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of my Diet Coke. But I take the opportunity and I write out my answers to common questions in this method. I'll literally lay it out. Situation. I did, like, this was the situation when this occurred, blah, blah, blah. the task that I took, and I'll write it all out, because I'm a person that when I write something out, it just way more clearly is recalled. Plus, during a virtual interview, a huge benefit to you is you can have your notes with you. You can't do that normally in a regular interview. So don't hesitate to just lay out your notes everywhere they can't see them, so you can just jump to that example right away. But I really like the STAR method. It keeps me from rambling, which, as you can see, I have a tendency to do when I don't have a script in front of me. And it just really buttons everything up super nicely. It gives everyone the information that they're looking for. Now, another method that you can do is called the card method. And the biggest difference between this and the STAR method is, instead of talking about the task, at the end you're going to talk about what you would do differently. So this is really great if you had a learning opportunity come up from one of your situations and you want to talk about what you would have done differently, or a lesson that you learned from it. The card method can be really useful for that. So like I said, I suggest writing out your examples ahead of time, especially those ones that you just know are going to come up. This can be a really useful method. And the last kind of tip I'll give you about answering questions is remember to breathe. It can be really easy to talk quickly and not catch your breath, and that is only going to hurt you. And honestly, if you even want to say, like, you know, can I just have a moment to think about that question and take a breath? No one's going to judge you for that. I actually always appreciated it when people slowed down, took that breath, took a moment, and thought about the best answer that they could give me. So take the moment and remember to breathe. Now, here are some questions that you might get in your interview that are illegal. And I want to talk about how you can handle these. The first way that you can handle these is by answering them. If you don't feel comfortable pushing back or doing another method, you can answer them, but you should know that you don't have to. These should have no bearing on whether or not you get a job. The next is you can evade the question. You can answer a different question, or you can kind of push it off to the side with humor. Or the last way is you can just refuse to answer. You can say, I don't understand why my age has any bearing on this job opportunity. I don't understand how my physical appearance would affect my ability to do this job. Those are all fine ways to handle this, but you should know if you get asked these questions that they're illegal. And I honestly would think about the company that's asking them, and if you want to work for a place that asks those types of questions. Sometimes it's because someone doesn't know any better, but a lot of the time it's because they're trying to figure something out. So not something I want to focus a lot on, but I do want to just make sure you know what's right and wrong. Another one that I don't have in here is your current salary. So a lot of states have started outlining asking people what they're currently making. That doesn't mean that they can't ask you what you want to make, but it does mean that they can't ask you about your past history. And what they're trying to do there is ensure that the gender pay gap doesn't get worse. And that's a big thing for us here at Stephens, since we're a women's institution. And I'm very passionate about the gender pay gap. It's a big part of my salary negotiation seminar. So what I would highly recommend, if you do get asked that question, if it's legal where you're asked, you can just say, you know, I'm not really comfortable just talking about my current pay, but here's what I'm hoping to make. Or here's what is the industry standard, and I hope to be around that. So you don't even have to give them what you want to make if you're not comfortable doing that. But you should know if it's legal or illegal in the state, and you can do that through a simple Google search. Is it legal to ask my wage in blank state? In the state of Washington, it became illegal in July of last year. In Missouri, I believe it's legal. So just be aware of that. And then some final tips and tricks as we kind of round into the end here. I suggest being ready and waiting around 10 minutes early. With virtual interviews, you could do 5. But have your space set up, be ready and sitting and taking deep breaths and preparing your notes at that time. You don't want to rush into your interview and feel frantic and out of breath or feeling underprepared. That won't help your nerves, and it won't help you have success. Making sure you have good service and internet connection. That is a big one. And sometimes there's not much you can do about that. But if you have a particular room in your house that doesn't get good internet, don't interview in that room. You might also warn your interviewer if you've found that your internet has been spotty recently, or maybe it gets spotty in storms like we had today here in Columbia. You might just warn them of that and have a backup plan ready if you want to connect over the phone. Be in a professional and quiet setting. So if I was doing a virtual interview, quite honestly, I would have put Feta in a different room, and I would have made sure that she couldn't jump into my arms in the middle of the presentation. So it's important to have that quiet and professional setting so you can make sure you have as easy communication as you can. Dress professionally for your interview. I know that can be tough because we're all working from home and we want to wear sweats, but I do highly suggest wearing a complete and professional outfit. I don't know if you all saw the news reporter who wasn't wearing pants, but he got caught on camera. He was wearing a suit jacket, shirt and tie, but had no pants on, and everyone could see. You don't want to be that news reporter. And then listen and give verbal feedback. Body language can be really tough to read, especially if your connection is a little choppy. So giving someone that, yeah, okay, is totally fine. I know it can seem a little over the top, but if you don't have a strong visual connection or you're over the phone, those types of interactions are really important. Next, you'll want to prepare your greeting. So it's important to think about, especially if you're over the phone, how are you going to answer that phone call? I know I have a particular tone when I answer the phone for my mom or when I answer the phone for my friends. So you're going to want to have a professional voice on. And something that really helps is make you sound friendly is just making sure that you're smiling. And I hate being told to smile by people. It's one of like the worst things I think you can tell a woman is like, why don't you just, it can actually help make your voice sound better. It can also really help your mood overall. It's scientifically shown that smiling makes you happier. So would highly suggest that. Avoid rambling or tangents. Stick to that star or card method, and then lay out your notes in front of you. Since they can't see them, this is your opportune time to have all of your examples, all of your data points, anything that you want in front of you. And then next, make sure, especially with virtual interviewing, that your background and the viewpoint is going to be really good. So we have a couple of examples here. In the top left, you'll see we have this gentleman. You can see ceiling tiles, you can see posters, the lighting isn't very good, he's backlit, the angle isn't good for him. I see Chris adjusting himself, that's great. And then in the next shot, you'll see he's next to a white wall, which is great, but he's still not well lit. So you're not gonna be able to read his facial expression very well. But in the last photo, it's a much better angle, he's well lit, he's a neutral background. It just makes it really, really easy to see what his face is saying and be able to read the visual cues from him. Now I will say not everyone has the ability to have like a blank canvas behind them. When I lived in Seattle, I lived in a 350 square foot apartment. And there was just no way I was gonna have a completely blank wall behind me. And so I made sure it was my kitchen cabinets, which were very clean and easy, and a very like just nice background. Today I have my bookshelf behind me, which I actually really enjoy seeing bookshelves behind people because I can ask what titles they're reading or what's on there. I love Shashan's background that has her name on it, and the rainbow. That's really beautiful. So your background doesn't have to be completely white. It can just be neutral and easy to read. Lighting is probably the most important. Lighting and angle, I would say. And then after your interview, I will say, I think after the interview, it's so important that you do a postmortem. So it's that cycle that we talked about with the personal assessments. Immediately do a postmortem on yourself. Maybe not like a few hours after, but at least within a week so that you can really assess how you feel that went. I'm the type of person that I sometimes like black out after interviews from time to time because I get so nervous and I'm not breathing well and so I can't remember. And so taking that beat to just really go through everything is important. And then the next thing is follow up with a thank you email. Thank you emails, thank you notes when possible are so important. I've kept every single thank you note I received as a recruiter, whether it was just for an interview or a job offer. They mean so much to me that someone took the time to write that note. And it seems like hokey and old fashioned, but no one does them anymore. So I really suggest it. And if you can't do that, a thank you email means just as much. So many people these days just don't think about it. It's just not in the forefront. So having that forefront to say thank you really shows a lot of character. And then I do want to spend just a little bit of time on what do you do if you get an offer? So hopefully your virtual interviews all go well and you get tons of offers. And it's important that you take some time to think through those. Like I said, this is like dating. You wouldn't accept an offer of marriage from just anyone if you're courting a bunch of people. You would want to take some time and think about your options. What boy is best for you, or girl, or whomever. And so when you get this offer, you're going to want to talk through it with your friends and your family, the people who know you best, who are going to know how you tick and what makes you happy. We are also happy to talk through your offers with you. While we don't know you quite as well as your friends and family, I can help you negotiate a salary negotiation. I can help you look at benefits and perks for your industry, and we can talk through all those things. You can talk with previous people that have worked there and get more information as you need it. You can talk to the employer a little bit more and ask more questions. You can think about the cost of living and housing, though I do suggest you do that before you start interviewing in other cities, and just know what you want your target to be. And then take time to make a good decision, whether that's a weekend or a whole week. Just tell the employer that you need a little bit of time to think it over, and give them a date that you'll get back to them. That is also a really good tactic if you think you're going to have multiple offers coming in over the course of the week. Tell them you'll get back to them the following Monday and see if those other offers come in. And then you can utilize those to your favor. And then here's just a little bit of a checklist for interview prep if you want to screenshot this or you want to take a picture. This is just kind of everything that we've gone over today that you can use kind of easily to just check off. I'm a person who really likes checklists, so they make me feel very accomplished. And finally, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting us. Like I said, if you need anything after this, whether it's you have some questions we can't get to, or you have a virtual interview coming up in a few weeks and you want to do a mock interview, or you want your resume reviewed, Ellen and I are readily available. We'd be happy to. We actually geek out on that stuff. So we have our email addresses here. Career@Stephens is our office email address. Something important to note about my email is it's E.R. Hansen, not just E. Hansen. My father took E. Hansen when he started with us a couple weeks before I did. And then we have all of our social media handles. And questions. What questions do we have? I'm going to end my slideshow and hand the presentation back.
Erin, I have a question.
Yeah.
I know you talked, I went to your interview skills class, and you talked a lot about some of the same things that you talked in this interview. And I know that you talked about a few more things that went into more the virtual part of it, but what would you say is one of the biggest or maybe most important discrepancies between doing a regular interview and a virtual interview?
I would say the biggest thing is your body language. Because it can be so difficult to read over Skype and you don't have everything to your advantage, especially being able to like feel the vibes in the room. It's important that you are providing enough visual cues to them, whether that's talking with your hands or making proper facial expressions. It's important to connect. I would say another thing, and this is something that I struggled with throughout this, look at the camera lens and not at the people. Being able to make that connection really helps. And it will just make you feel like you're in the room to the other person in that way. That was something Ellen was really good about last week that I just struggled with.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you were able to tune in. Any other questions?
There's some coming. Let's see. There's a question that would an employer asking me, what is your learning style or leadership style, be an example of a personal question?
Yeah, absolutely. They're wanting to know from you personally what those types of styles are, so that they can probably best serve you or see if their culture is going to be able to fit into that. Those are the types of questions where I don't necessarily see that there's a wrong answer, as much as it's trying to make sure you're a culture fit for them. So whether you're a servitude leader and you want to lead with that, I would recommend explaining what your style is after you say that, because not everyone's going to know what a servitude leader is, or kinesthetic might be a word that people haven't heard before. So make sure you do a little bit of an explanation, but I would definitely say that's a personal question where they're just trying to see if it's a fit for the culture or for the team.
Can you give another example or two of a weakness and how to spin it?
Yeah. Let's see. Does anyone have a weakness that they want me to try and spin? Because I'm blank, but it's been a long day here.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you want.
Do you want to
What
talk to
about
the
if you,
public
oh,
speaking?
sorry.
No, go ahead, Mackenzie.
Oh, I was just thinking, what about maybe coming out of college? What if you just have a lack of experience in the job field that you're trying to go into, besides maybe just your classes, but maybe not ever having worked in that job field or something like that?
Yeah. So that's when I would lean on the other types of experience that you have. So whether it's, Mackenzie, you're part of sports, right? You play, what is it?
Yes, I play basketball, or I played.
Yeah, so that's a great team sport where you can talk about your ability to communicate with your team, your ability to inspire and lead, being able to take a loss really well and also be able to take a win really well. So I would rely on that type of experience where you don't have the work experience. If they ask you about how you handle stress, you can talk about when your team was down and out and they were feeling really low and how you inspired them or how you brought it back. Or you can even talk about in that situation when it didn't work out to your favor and how you then picked up the team and moved forward. All of those types of things really matter, especially when you don't have the background or the technical experience that they're looking for. What were you going to say, Ellen? I think you were going to toss me a weakness.
I was going to say public speaking.
Oh, yeah. So public speaking is something a lot of people struggle with, right? And that's probably going to be a weakness or an opportunity that your interviewer has, or at least one of them. And so if you're doing something like pushing yourself to speak out more in class, doing presentations in class, there are groups called Toastmasters where you can go and actually practice public speaking, and that's what everyone is there for. These types of Zoom conversations, I know people have been doing class presentations, senior capstones, all of that is practice. And so you can talk about, I have this fear of public speaking, but what I'm trying to do is put myself out there more. For example, with my senior capstone, I had to speak to 50 people on a Zoom call. And so to prepare for that, these are the steps that I took. The call went really well. I got all these compliments or whatever came out of it, and then talk about how excited you are for more opportunities to grow your public speaking ability. That would be how I would spin that and talk about it. Now, I'm a person who loves public speaking. I actually told Ellen that was one reason I was excited to take this job, was being able to connect with people and public speak. And so I might talk about that on my strengths side and talk about how I enjoy putting together presentations and I enjoy that whole journey.
Let's see, there's another question, and it says, the job/internship I want is halfway across the world, Dublin, Ireland. Any tips or tricks that would make them want me instead of someone right down the street that they could interview face to face?
Yeah, that is a tough one. And I struggled with that when I was moving to Seattle because I was still here in Columbia when I was interviewing for a lot of my jobs. And I actually, Zulily straight up told me, once you're in town, let us know, and then we'll move forward with your final interview and present an offer if there's going to be one. And that was really disheartening for me to hear. And unfortunately, some places will just be that way. But if they are open, what I would say is talk about what makes your experience different. The experiences that you have here in America and from Stephens and everything is going to be very unique. And you may have skills and tool sets that you possess that other people in Ireland or wherever you want to interview just don't have. And I know Chris chimed in on that chat and said he'd be happy to connect with you. I don't know if, Chris, you have any personal advice on that, but I'd be happy to give you the mic if you do. You're still on mute, Chris.
I would take a slightly different approach and really possibly major on how much cultural affinity there is. And, as Americans, you all know how much Irish influence, for instance, has pervaded American culture. So you can really talk to how you can fit in with the people there. The other thing that you can do, and this is, for instance, also common for Australians, is that at any one time, 10% of the Australian adult population, working population, is not in Australia. They're around the world gaining experience elsewhere. And the same tends to apply to the Irish, and you get a disproportionate number of Swedes and Finns and Danes and Norwegians who go abroad in order to get the multinational and international experience. And so it's natural that an employer would want to encourage a breadth of different cultures and experience and potential to come in. Do not be, actually, I think you've got a strength, not a weakness. I thought, look at these things not as hurdles to overcome, but advantages in your favor. But as I said, Ash, I'd be happy to have a chat with you.
I would also say another tip that you could use to get in with that company is finding folks that work there or folks that could make recommendations for you, to make the connection a little bit more personal. To Chris's point, you know, being part of that culture and being part of that family could be really, really helpful. And we have folks, especially from Stephens, all over the place. I know of several folks that are in the UK right now doing master's programs or living there. I know folks that live in Paris. I have a contact in New Zealand. So we have folks all over the place that would be happy to make connections for you or utilize their network to connect you with folks that might be able to give you a little bit of a leg up.
For what it's worth, I'm doing a project literally tracking down international alumni at the moment. There are 528 living alumni outside of the United States.
Love it.
Including 217 in Europe. Don't think there's not people who could talk to you without knowing anything about you, but I'd be only too happy to try and find one or two. Bit like when I met Erin, for goodness sake. You never know. Really, really believe in the power of loose connections. And this is a community that wants to help each other. And you Americans hate saying no. People like to be helpful.
Very true. Well, Shashan, any other questions? Or Shannon?
I'm not seeing any in the queue. Again, we don't want to limit anyone. So if you feel more comfortable asking the question yourself, feel free to unmute yourself. You can send it to Shannon or I or everyone. We're fine with that. I guess one question I would throw out, Erin, would be, and I think you kind of spoke to it, but if you get the illegal question, is there anything you should do post-interview? Like if you, whatever your instincts help you in the interview, so you answer it, you keep going, or you kind of fumble or say something like, well, I'm not going to answer that. But is there a post-interview follow-up either way that you would suggest?
I think it depends, honestly, on how uncomfortable the question made you feel and what the question was. So there are definitely places that you can report stuff like that. Normally companies will also have HR aliases that you could potentially write into. Or if you decide to go work for that company, you could report it afterwards to the HR company, and they'll generally keep that anonymous for you and give the feedback or do the reprimand to that individual, depending on, you know, the severity of the question and how many strikes that individual might have against them. Unfortunately, though, there aren't many like governing bodies that you can go to or anything like that. So I don't know, Ellen, do you have any more information on resources that they could utilize for that type of stuff?
I would recommend what you suggested.
Okay. Yeah, those are the tough ones where it's like you want to be able to tell someone about that type of stuff, but unfortunately, it can work against you in some ways if you report it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, especially if you've decided that that's not a company that you want to work for.
I'm just double checking the chat.
We have a great comment from Jenny that I, having worked in the alumni office for a long time as well, believe that our alumni love to help students. It's they were in your seats at one time, and they really like to give a hand out to help you move through navigate the world. So wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, please utilize the alumni office connections. And I'm not in the alumni office right now, but I'm accessible as well. So if you find yourself headed to a location and just want to connect with people in that area that maybe can help you find the places to the better neighborhoods to try to live in, or great opportunities to network with people, those kinds of things. Or your profession. Even if it's, you don't know where you want to live, but you know you want to be in fashion or theater or whatever, we may be able to help you connect with people that can just give you the right kind of advice to be successful. So definitely take advantage of your Stephens network.
One more question just came through, Aaron, and it said, what do you feel about virtual backgrounds?
Virtual backgrounds. I think they can be really fun, depending on I would say it depends on the company you're interviewing with and the vibe that you're getting from them. And when in doubt, I would say ask your recruiter. So it's kind of like what you should wear to an interview. When I was at Zulily, Zulily is very much still startup-esque. If someone showed up in a full suit, it would really show us that they don't understand what the culture is of the company. But if they also showed up in cargo shorts, that's a little too casual. But dark wash denim and a nice button-up was totally fine. So there might be companies that have a lot of fun with virtual backgrounds. And then there might be companies that are really turned off by them. So I would say probably ask your recruiter what they would suggest and if it's okay. And if they say yes, then have fun with it. I would love a virtual interview with a virtual background. I think that'd be so much fun. But I think Ellen might have a different feel for it.
No, I don't have a different feel. I did want to chime in. For me personally, I know my computer, the virtual backgrounds are really distracting for me, and they don't always pick up. So sometimes I'll be pixelated, I'll blend in with the background. So I know me personally, I should not use that. What I did want to chime in on is just the vast amount of video software that I have used in the past 5 weeks. We're on Zoom together right now. We've been on Skype. We've been on Microsoft Teams. I've been on Google Hangouts. So if you are getting a recommendation or a request to be on that type of software, practice it first. Zoom, I think, is great. It's so wonderful. We're using our reactions. We're highlighting speakers. We have a chat box. What I've found I can't stand is Google Hangouts. I dread meetings in it. It's not an effective meeting strategy for me. And then one other thing I'll say, because Aaron mentioned it, I have a sticker next to my webcam. So it attracts my attention. Last week when I presented, I have a ring light that I use to spotlight my face. So it really draws my attention to the webcam, and that's why I'm looking at you right now. So do practice that. But if you recognize, oh, you look down for a second, you look back up, you look down, you're going to be doing that in a face-to-face interview anyways. It is okay to break eye contact. So try for more looking at the webcam, but if you take a break, that's okay too.
Great suggestion. That's a really great suggestion.
I'll be working on that
starting
now.
Absolutely.
Because I never look at the webcam.
That's a very,
never.
Yes, it made me very aware all of a sudden. Yes. Yep.
Shannon and I will practice at our touch base meeting every day.
Aaron also showed me something in Zoom the other day that you can look at right now. If you hover over your own photo and go to your 3 dots menu, you can hide yourself. And Aaron and I actually both just read an article earlier this week, how when we're conversing in our office, we're not constantly seeing ourselves, and constantly seeing yourself plays with your psyche and how you're interacting with people. So if that is off-putting to you, to look at yourself, to be seeing this video of yourself, just turn it off. Thank you for showing me that. Really.
I just did it just to practice that. That's good tip too. Very good. Yes, we're all learning new tips and tricks with this new, I mean, it's new to me. Definitely I'm not somebody who loves to speak on the phone. I'm much better in this format than I am on the phone because I can see people, but it's different. I'm an in-person. I like to see body language. I like to see facial expressions. And even in this format where you can see a face, even with great lighting, you don't always get facial expressions. So to the way that I read them. So it's something
Well, you are
to learn.
from the theater, Shannon, so you're used to the big faces.
That's right, big faces. Yes. Exactly. Any other questions? It's been really, 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 truly helpful and wonderful. So thank you for presenting tonight. Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you for asking us.
yeah. Everybody give
Lots
us
of reaction,
yes.
thumbs up. Great job. And our final event of the Next Step series will be tomorrow. We have a virtual open house for our Masters in Education. And that has two different tracks, a clinical track and an education track. So if you or someone in your spheres of influence are interested, it is not too late. They can register for that and they can attend. It'll be 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Again here, and we'll have Dr. Klaus will be with us and will be our featured facilitator. But tonight we thank Aaron for doing a phenomenal, wonderful job. Round of applause, reactions. Yay. I need like a Stevens tent, a flag that I can wave or something, but they were so helpful. I was frantically taking notes over here. So
Thank you, students, and Margaret, our fellow alum, for joining us this evening too. It's great to see all of your faces and to be with you. So we didn't get a chance to welcome Armelia. It's nice to see you as well.
All right.
All right.
Well, everyone, thank you. Please have a great evening. Thanks again for making the time. And thank you, Ellen and Aaron, for all your work. Be safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.